I'm going to start off by talking a little bit about the YMCA Camp Northern Lights and sort of just the general, what is Camp Northern Lights and what do we do for those of you who aren't familiar. And then Sal's going to come up and talk a little bit more about the specific equity initiatives that are happening at camp right now. So just to start off, I feel like sharing Camp Northern Lights mission is a good way to give you, oh, thank you for that, Elton. A good way to sort of give you an idea of who we are and what our values are at Northern Lights. The mission of the YMCA Camp Northern Lights is to nurture our need for belonging and connection to each other and to the outdoors. For those of you who don't know, the YMCA Camp Northern Lights is located about halfway in between Babbitt and Ely over on Bear Island Lake. Here's kind of a map of what our camp looks like. We were originally purchased from two different resorts in 2018, I believe. That was the Timberwolf Lodge and the Northern Lights Lodge, for those of you who remember those locations. And also in, I believe, the summer of 2019, the private property separating those two resorts was also purchased by the YMCA. And so now we own about a half mile of waterfront on Bear Island Lake with a number of different camper cabins that families come to all year round and can stay in and enjoy the forest and the water of the Northwoods. So many of you know about the YMCA Family Camp du Nord. To give you a little bit of history, the Family Camp du Nord, which is located north near the Boundary Waters, north of Ely, is a very popular YMCA family camp. A family camp being, if you think of sort of your classic summer camp setting where kids go away for the summer, they learn to canoe, they stay in cabins, that whole thing. But family camp was born out of the idea that families, parents, grandparents, whoever comes along with their kids to summer camp and can sort of enjoy all of the summer camp activities and have programs for kids to go off and meet other children of their age, while the adults can kind of bond together as well and create that community. So the Family Camp du Nord was so popular that the YMCA decided that there needed to be another family camp in the area to kind of foster this community and this idea that families, both adults and kids, could come together to northern Minnesota and enjoy what we had to offer. So Family Camp du Nord was again so popular that Northern Lights was purchased in 2018 from those resorts. And now in the summertime, we offer 6-day and 3-day session family camp programs. So families come from all over the state of Minnesota and even outside the greater US area. They can come up for just a weekend or for a whole week of camp programming and enjoy what there is to see up here in the summer. So the property that we have at Northern Lights has 30 cabins, bungalows, and tent sites. So that includes full facility cabins. That means they have water, they have electricity, the whole 9 yards. Then in this bottom picture here, you can see those are the bungalows, which have electricity, but they're a little bit more of a bunkhouse. They don't have a full facility kitchen or bathroom. And then campsites, and those are all tiered at different prices, which I mentioned because we want to make sure that families have different levels of access depending on their financial situation. So in the summertime, you can kind of see here some ideas of what family camp in the summer looks like. It looks like a lot of time on the water, a lot of time with camp counselors. There's what we call age groups in the morning when kids of the same age can get together, like I mentioned, and all kind of spend time together while the parents get a little bit of a break from the kids. And then there's all sort of afternoon programming as well, where there's mountain biking. We have a number of new mountain biking trails that have been put in at camp over the last year. We have boat rentals, both kayaks, canoes, stand-up paddleboards, and motorized rentals as well for people who want to take out a pontoon boat or a fishing boat. And then sort of your classic arts and crafts and orienteering and nature walks and that sort of thing as well. And we also operate in the fall, winter, and spring. So we're mostly known in the summertime as being a family camp. And most people, when you think of YMCA camps, you think of summer camp. But we also offer our facilities year round. And so families can come up and experience a similar type of family camp experience for a few weekends out of the year, as well as what we call book your own getaway, which is where families can sort of do more of a cabin rental situation. And still use our equipment. They can go cross-country skiing and fat tire biking and use our sauna, but there's less staff available at that time. So it's more kind of choose your own adventure for those families in those seasons. Here's just some more ideas of the programs that I mentioned there. You can see a picture of the fat tire bikes that the trails that we've built, we're very proud of, to kind of go along with the Hidden Valley trails that are available here in town. Because we are right on the water of Bear Island Lake, there's a lot of waterfront activity. And then you can see sort of some photos of our pontoons and fishing gear, as well as our art barn, where kids can do arts and crafts and then get out on the lake in the winter to do things like broom ball and ski and snowshoe and that sort of thing. Nope.
So can't suggest that.
I would be involved with somebody from town coming and trying out your mountain bike trail.
You are welcome to come and try out our mountain bike trails. Depends on when you wanted to come, because in the summertime, we have a lot of families using those trails, but things definitely slow down. And there's certain days that are better than others, but we have about, I think it's a little less than 3 miles of trail available.
So call ahead.
Call ahead, yep.
Is it working?
Yep. And then I think the last thing that I kind of wanted to point out here is that we are trying to build some relationships with local organizations as well. So we do some volunteering work with our summer staff here at the Ely Community Resource and Ely Adventure School, as well as the Ely Food Shelf. Sal will talk a little bit more about our relationship with the Voice Sport Band of Chippewa, International Wolf Center, Listening Point, Minnesota Adopt a Highway, Save the Boundary Waters, and local artists and tradespeople. So just to highlight that Camp Northern Lights, it is because our value, and again, to go back to our mission statement, is to connect people to each other and to this area, to nature, and to the community of the greater Ely area. It's really important to us that we connect with you all and the community here in Ely and give back our time, because we're established here kind of right in between Ely and Babbitt. We want to make sure that families have a good sense of place of what it means to be both in the Superior National Forest and in northern Minnesota, in the Ely area, that there are people here who live year round, that it's fun and important to connect to as well. I'm going to hand it over to Sal, who's going to start off by talking about our equity initiatives, by starting with the summer of 2020.
Awesome, thanks, Anna. Great introduction, some context for Camp Northern Lights. You did mention the Voice Sport Band of Chippewa, so I just want to back up one slide and just touch on that here. So, local organizations, in the past couple of years, we have developed a land acknowledgement statement at Camp Northern Lights with our community advisory board, as well as some guidance from the Voice Sport Band of Chippewa, their executive director at the Heritage Center. And so one thing that we're doing new this summer is we're taking our adults during the mornings when the kids are away in age groups to go visit the Heritage Center as a field trip opportunity. And so we hope that that'll kind of be a way that our campership can learn more about the local Indigenous people. And with that more information, we can make kind of more informed decisions on respecting our local Indigenous population. So the summer of 2020 was, I guess, started with the murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis, and the staff team that summer really wanted to take action in a meaningful way at camp to feel like they were helping. And so many of you may remember the march that happened in town. On the left is a picture of some of our staff at that Black Lives Matter march. And then on the right, there's a picture of our staff. So what we decided to do is we decided to create this program that we called STEPS. So it stands for Supporting the Transformation of Equity and Power in Outdoor Spaces. And so we came up with this idea kind of in partnership with our board, some outside community members. And so the idea was that in order to kind of reach some of these populations that have been historically underrepresented at family camp, and to kind of build community with them and with our existing community, that we wanted to set up these summer camp sessions where 50% or more of the campers in camp were either Black, Indigenous, people of color, or LGBTQ+ identifying. And so the idea that half of our campership would be identifying that way would be that the other half, kind of, we can bring our whole community together in support of this equity work. And so on the right, you can see our staff team. In the summer of 2020, we decided to raise some money to make this happen. And the culmination of our raising money was a run walk that we did from camp to town. Some people did a full half marathon, some people just walked around Miners Lake, but this was us after we had reached our fundraising goal in 2020. So yes, here is STEPS. And so I guess I'll just read the goal here. The goal of the Taking S.T.E.P.S initiative is to thoughtfully and intentionally create more opportunities for BIPOC and LGBTQ+ families to experience the North Woods in a family camp setting. In doing so, we hope to change the experience of who is present and continue to grow a culture of universal belonging at camp. One thing we like to talk about is kind of removing that ability to predict who's going to be at camp. And so this is kind of one way that we are going to do that. And we have been kind of up to that the past couple summers. So in 2020, we also wanted to mention that we had a lot of local business support for our fundraising efforts, which was awesome. We did a raffle and a lot of businesses donated to it. So we just wanted to acknowledge that. We're really lucky to be in this community of such generous businesses and people who also align with our mission. So 2020 kind of being this first year of we're developing the program, we're raising money for it, thinking about what it's going to be like. 2021 and 2022 were our years of kind of operating this program. So the first summer in 2021, we did 2 sessions, 2 step sessions of family camp. One was a 6-day and one was a 3-day session. On the left here, you can see a picture of a family from our 6-day session in 2021. And so kind of how we did it was we kind of hoped it would kind of spread the same way family camp usually does, so by word of mouth. So families who are interested in the program would hear about it and then go onto our website and fill out an intent to attend camp form. And then we kind of did it on a first come, first serve basis where we reached out to these families, coordinated to see what kind of, or how many people they needed to come up and what kind of accommodations they were interested in. And we asked them to pay a $50 deposit on their cabin or site, but then that was refunded at the end of their session. So we kind of also removed that financial barrier to come to camp. And some of the families were new families to camp. Some of them were returning families who came with our first step session. And a lot of the families who did come that first year also had existing connections among that group, which was cool. And yeah, so then from that 2-session first summer, this current summer of 2022, we have 4 step sessions. So 2 6-day and 2 3-day. We also got a lot of feedback. The first summer, we've been running these discussions each week at camp with the adults in camp. We call them our equity in the outdoors conversations. So each week we kind of let the adults know in camp kind of what we've been up to as far as equity work. And then we also kind of ask for feedback, ideas, that type of thing. And we did get a lot of feedback that the LGBTQ+ community might be interested in some type of steps session. So this summer we had our first Pride session, which took place a couple sessions ago. And so this picture on the right is a picture of a Pride flag that some campers were hanging on their cabin. So yeah.
Can I have you experiment with holding the mic a little further away?
Further away? How's this?
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sorry if that was too close. And then I guess we kind of wanted to give a little bit of context for the budget and the funding and how kind of all the financials break down for the STEPS program. So the cost in 2022 for running the STEPS program is $118,000. And basically what that covers is kind of reserving the cabins and sites for families who come through our STEP sessions and participate in our STEPS sessions. And they also fund this tiered pricing system that we developed kind of in partnership with the Greater Y. It's the first time, I think, that the Y of the North, which is our organization that oversees us, it's the first time that they've ever had a tiered pricing system, like in any Y of the North program. So that was developed this past year. And so families who are coming up for STEPS this summer, they get to choose one of 5 tiers to pay, and then they pay that, and then they come up. So funding that system, also offering up to full scholarships for our STEPS participating families. We've also provided a $150 experience stipend that STEPS participating families can choose to use or not on things like boat rentals, bike rentals, any kind of fee-based thing that you need to participate at camp, as well as the salary of our equity, diversity, inclusion coordinator. And so the first summer we had an equity, diversity, inclusion coordinator was last summer. So this summer is the second summer we've had the position. It's a seasonal position, so it's just kind of the summer months, and it's funded kind of in this greater cost of STEPS. We also at camp have this thing called the Leadership Development Program. And so that is kind of our teen program, open for teens age 14 through 18. And they come up for 2 weeks and they get to participate in camp programming. They get to kind of help out a little bit around camp, do some chores, and then learn about different leadership styles. And they get to explore their own leadership style at camp. And so this program is kind of also a little bit of a pipeline to staff. So a lot of our LDP participants have then gone on to become summer staff members. And so in this STEPS program, we decided this summer to set aside 5 LDP spaces for our STEPS program as well. And so how we get that money is grants, tiered pricing, kind of the funds that come through that, as well as grassroots donations. So a couple of the grants we have received so far, the YUSA grant, we are lucky to have the support of a couple grant writers in the grant writing team from the Greater Y of the North. So they've been looking for grants for us and applying for them. And so the YUSA grant is one we received. We also received one from the Northeastern Minnesotans for Wilderness. And then we're waiting on kind of this larger grant that would fund our STEPS program as well as some other Y initiatives. And that'll hopefully come later this summer. Our tiered pricing program. So it looks a little bit like this. If you look at our website, this is what you'd see if you're a STEPS participating family. So you see on the left the cabin or site names, and then the different tiers that are available at each site. It's new this summer. 2021, like I said, was just a $50 deposit. We did get some feedback that families were willing to pay more than the $50. And so some made donations in 2021, but this was also kind of developed in order to make people feel like they could just pay what they like and what they are able to pay for camp. And so this system has raised about $26,000 so far for this summer. Our grassroots fundraising is kind of, we've done it a little bit differently every summer. We've kind of always had this run walk that is kind of our culmination. And so this summer we are expecting to kick off our fundraising campaign in the next week or so. And so our goal is to hit $20,000 for this summer, just from kind of our social media presence, posting incentives, and finding people to donate that way. And then looking ahead, our summer fundraising campaign is about to kick off. We're also planning on kind of a STEPS potluck or community open house in the Twin Cities to offer a space for people to learn about STEPS and to spend some time together later this summer. Another thing, so the registration for STEPS, we're thinking about changing that this fall. In the past, it's been that first come, first serve model, and we're thinking about switching it to more of a lottery system. So if anybody's familiar with the lottery system for a general family camp, you kind of get, you register for the lottery, and then you get a time that you get to log on to your computer. And then during that time, whatever's available to you, then you get to choose which cabin or site and which session throughout the summer that you'd like to come up to camp for. And so we decided to do it that way versus the first come, first serve, just because the first come, first serve method meant that like families would have to be on their computer at a certain time to actually get that registration to go through. With the lottery, it'll be more of an assigned thing that hopefully more people can make it work. We also, through one of our STEPS participating families, learned about this partnership with the North Hennepin Community College. And so they will be hosting a environmental justice and nature immersion course partially at Camp Northern Lights this upcoming fall. So that kind of came about through a STEPS participating family. And then finally, we do have a video for you all. So one of our STEPS participating families in 2021, Anna Monroe, who is also coming back to camp as a STEPS family this summer. She wrote a poem about her week at camp. And so she got it on video. There's some pictures in here kind of about her session. And so we just wanted to share it with you to kind of hopefully share a little bit of what this program can mean for one of our campers.
Long drive from Wisconsin, car full of kids, my own and someone else's. We play dance music loud because my car's the fun car. Road snacks and bathroom breaks. Bridge to Minnesota, cell service goes out. Into the pine trees, past Embarrass and Babbitt. Then finally, the campsite. Slow down, you are here. Gravel crunches under car tires. 3 children greet us. Lulu, Liu, Zainab. I unpack books, games, food, sleeping bags. My kids run to the water. They've already made friends. We meet old timers, Sandy and Paul. They're missing their children and their grandchildren. I say, borrow some of ours. Later they do, reading stories in Cassiopeia while we look at the stars. It's a great day to have a great day. Yoga outside under the white birches. Leaves dancing as we stretch, breathe, let go. Elder Dave Larson told me, the birches love people. Their bark holds our stories. My hair's still wet from morning swim. Cigarnish chanting, Big Dipper, Little Dipper, as we all run in. Morning moment, announcements, and the kids off to age groups. Such pride as 4-year-old Somo runs with his group without looking back. In the forest, Sal shows us plants and flowers with careful hands. I walk with my sister, we meet other women, our hearts always open. Community sing, voices in a circle surrounded by pines. And walks around us, gifting us words. The trees listen, notes float upwards. Conan brings his hand drum, teaches around dance, gifts tree tobacco. His son joins the dance. Teens step awkwardly from their city selves, slowly freed by the water, the laughter, the space. Meeting new friends, Honduras, Nicaragua, Mexico, Canada, Ethiopia, all from somewhere else, people like me. Our Dakota and Ojibwe relatives gift us teachings of this land, this place that gifts us. My daughter Kaya has found her own circle, all brown like her. Dan says, we want this to be a yes culture. I feel it everywhere I tread. Yes to friendship, yes to fun, yes to laughter, yes to community, yes to feeling I belong.
Yeah, so thank you, everyone. I guess that's kind of all we had. And then, any questions or not? Yeah.
Is there a step program at Denard as well?
Yeah, so the STEPS program is specific to Northern Lights. So Denard is, kind of, they're doing their own equity work. It looks a little bit different from what we're doing. Some of the things we do are the same, and we talk to each other a lot because we both run family camps up in northern Minnesota, but they don't have a specific STEPS program. I guess a little bit of the history too. there's been like an outreach and inclusion committee on the Northern Lights and Du Nord board. So it's kind of part of the board work that outreach and inclusion has been a focus. And for about 10 years now, there's been an outreach and inclusion initiative at Du Nord that did carry over to Northern Lights, where they set aside cabins and sites for families of color. But it was maybe 2 or 3 cabins or sites per session, and like a couple times throughout the summer. But it wasn't that like 50% or more of camp that was set aside like STEPS is. Totally, that's a great question. So the question was about feedback and how we're getting it. So our STEPS sessions, they do receive like a general feedback survey, like every other camper family who comes to Camp Northern Lights. So it's like a survey questionnaire. They get sent it via email after they leave camp. And that's where we get a lot of our feedback for program, maintenance, kind of all aspects of camp. And so we do look at those. That's some written feedback. We also have had these equity in the outdoors conversations, like I mentioned. And so they happen every 6-day camper session. And so that's just a time for where we invite all the adults in camp to come talk about equity. And yeah, so we get feedback from that. You're right, the conversations do end up going a little differently depending on who's there each time. We were lucky to partner with an outside kind of evaluation and research company called Arcadia last summer. And so they had kind of an independent evaluator come to camp. And so during our STEPS session, our first STEP session, they hosted, I think, 2 or 3 conversations with STEPS participating families. And they asked them questions like, how is this serving you? How can we do better? And collected those responses and kind of gave us a written summary of what they found there. But yeah, does that help answer the question? Okay. Yeah, question?
So first praise and then kind of a challenge question. I really like what you're doing with integrating your STEPS campers with the other campers. That seems really important, that that relationship and conversation is really important to doing that integration work. The challenge is, I wonder if you have, realizing that you can't be all things to all people, right? But I wonder if you have reached out or connected in some way to disability community as another category of folks who would really benefit from having that kind of connection to a natural environment and also being integrated with other families.
Sure.
Yes, the question was about STEP sessions, and we talked about sort of the BIPOC community and the LGBTQ+ community. And the question was specifically about disability community and if there's the potential space for them in STEP sessions in the future. And I think that's a great point, that there are always going to be more people that we want to serve and more interest groups that we want to bring to camp and make them feel like they're part of our community and they're welcome to. There's no plans right now for a disability specific STEP session, but that's definitely in the conversation. We have a few projects that are not STEPS focused, but that are about accessibility. So for example, one of our cabins was just converted this past year to be ADA friendly with wide enough ramps and bathrooms for wheelchair access. We are renovating another one of our cabins this fall, winter, spring to be available for next summer, so that there'll be more options in that regard. But that is, I do just want to acknowledge that that is part of the conversation, but there's no active STEP session targeting that group right now. Thank you.
Great question. Yeah. So the question was around the equity, diversity, inclusion coordinator position. So currently, yes, it's a seasonal position, but are there any conversations about making it more of a year-round position at camp? And yeah, I can tell you that I think it's the only camp in the Y of the North system to have an equity, diversity, inclusion coordinator. Last summer was our first summer to have one. And the person who did it that summer, Anj, she is now still working for the Y, but now she's the program director for equity inclusion for all camping. So, that was a role that was just recently created. I think there's talk of getting this position at more camps. I think there's also, the thought that it could be expanded to a year-round position. Personally, I think there would be work that I could do in the off season to fill my time. But it's also kind of thinking about our fundraising, max and like how much are we really able to fundraise in a year. And so currently with like the sustainability of, we want to make sure that there are 4 step sessions per summer. I think, adding that additional year-round salary for the EDI coordinator would be that additional cost. And you'd have to think about like, where is that money going to come from? But I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, and you're saying you do have, as the Y organization does have a person in that role year round.
Yes, the Y. Yeah, so the question was, does the Y have a person in that role year round? And yes, yep, there is a position, the program director for equity inclusion, and they work on STEPS year round, the registration and everything like that. And they also work with other camps on their equity initiatives as well. Yeah.
Who's that person who's in that position?
Her name is Angela Wunderlich. Yeah, the question was who is in that position? That's Angela Wunderlich. She's the program director for equity inclusion for camps. She's also the Bold Gold program director, which is one of the Y's boys and girls outdoor leadership development programs that operates at a variety of different camps. So she does both of those things. That's a great question. Yeah, so the question was around integration and how we have 50% or more of camp kind of dedicated to these STEPS participating families. But is there anything that we do around framing or, before people come to camp to kind of address that? And yeah, I think, we advertise that we run our STEP sessions on these specific dates throughout the summer. So if you're a camper that's a non-STEPS family and you're registering for summer, you can see, all right, this session is going to be a STEPS session, and I'm registering for that. And here's what STEPS is on our website. But other than that,
I'll say something.
All
Yeah, I think besides the registration process, there's not a whole lot of specific prep work that goes into framing it. But I will say that the STEPS program was sort of born out of this staff momentum in 2020 after George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter protests. So that original momentum came from the staff, and it's now a part of every welcoming conversation that we have at camp. There's paperwork in every cabin that talks about STEPS and what the program is and fundraising. So it is very much a part of the culture of camp and something that the staff is very passionate about, and that because our community is small and very connected, that all of our families are familiar with, even if it's their first time coming to camp. By the end of their session, they know what STEPS is, they know that diversity inclusion is important to us, and they know where to find more information if they'd like to on our website. Yeah, next question.
Does the C in YMCA still stand for Christian? And if so, how do you play that out and how do you keep that from not being exclusive?
Yes, the question was, does the C in YMCA still stand for Christian, and how does that work with our values and the organization as a whole? And I will talk about this a little bit, and Sal, if you have more to add, you definitely can. So I found it confusing when I first started working for the YMCA, because you have the YMCA, then you have the Y, you have Y of the North, which is the umbrella organization, you have Camp Northern Lights, you have Family Camp, which is different than other camps. So I believe that the YMCA has now been rebranded as just the Y. So I believe the Christian is still part of the values. If you go on like the Y of the North website, it does still say Christian values. But I think there is sort of a movement there is a grappling that's happening right now on an organizational level that is above Northern Lights and is above Sal and I's position, to be honest. But there is sort of a conversation that's happening that's like, what does Christian values mean? And is this inclusive? And this is a part of our history. And how do we stay true to what we meant when we said Christian values and those values with, making this feel like an inclusive and welcoming program? So I would say that the Y is a big ship, and turning a big bureaucratic ship takes a lot of time, as many of you know. And I think that is a conversation that is slowly in progress right now. So I'd be interested if you had anything to add to that.
Yeah, I think I would just add too that the Y of the North does have its 5 core values. And I don't know if every Y system has like the core values the same way the Y of the North does. But there were 4. And then I think a couple summers ago, the 5th one of equity was added. Yeah, respect, responsibility, caring, honesty, and equity are the 5 core values of the Y, which are also talked a lot about at camp through our skits and songs. And we kind of try and promote those values as well as a camp.
Great question.
Yeah, that's a great question. So the question was about outreach and how we create those relationships with BIPOC families and LGBTQ plus individuals. And so, yeah, I can speak a little bit on that. We, from the beginning, we kind of just hoped that this would spread just through word of mouth. That's the way kind of people traditionally hear about family camp. And so, a friend of a friend recommending come up to camp. We have this program, might be a good fit. And so we think that that's kind of a good way to ensure that like families feel well supported. If they know somebody, especially if they're going to be at camp at the same time. And so that's kind of how we've done it. With the LGBTQ plus community in particular, we did have an ad in the Lavender magazine, which is a LGBTQ plus magazine in Minneapolis, where we advertised the Pride session that we had for this summer. I'm not sure if anybody did find out about camp through that, but yeah, that's a little bit about our outreach there.
I'll also say we sort of mentioned the YMCA board, which includes campers and staff, and there's a number of different things that they come together to talk about. But there is a section of our board that is called the Outreach and Inclusion Committee, and they sort of work together. I'm not involved with that branch, so I don't know as much about what they are doing right now. They take the summers off and work primarily from Labor Day through Memorial Day. But they work specifically with how we can spread the word more and invite more families. But I do think that there is a lot of word of mouth, and social media has been huge as well with the spreading the word on that. And I think we always want to be careful about how we invite people to camp, and that we are making sure that we're not like forcing anybody to come to camp to be more diverse. That's not the purpose of what we're trying to do. We're trying to welcome people that want the opportunity to come here. And so that's something that I think we always try and keep in mind as well. Sure. So just to repeat that question, the question was about what do age groups look like at camp? How are they divided? And what do sort of the activities or the conversations look like based upon the kids' ages? I'm going to let Sal actually talk about that because he knows more about program life in the summer than I do.
Cool. Yeah, so I spent my first summer at Northern Lights on program staff, so I was working in age groups. And so, yeah, it's definitely different depending on the age. We have a nursery for our 0 to 3-year-olds, where they kind of have a really structured day or morning of like, here's nap time, here's snack time, here's outside play time. And then all the way from 4 to 18, kind of the different kids in camp are broken down depending on how many kids there are at camp that session, and how many kids of each age there are. So for example, some sessions there might be a really big 14 to 18-year-old age group. Some sessions there's a 10-year-old age group that has 14 kids in it. And so that's kind of how it works. And then different counselors are paired with those different ages. We have an art barn day for each age group, no matter the age, except for the nursery. So they go to the art barn and do certain arts and crafts with our art barn coordinators. There's also a biking day for the older kids, the teens. There is, so kind of some activities remain consistent throughout the age groups. They kind of get a similar variety of activities. But then a lot of the age group too is just kind of structured on how that counselor wants to lead that group of kids. So they create like an age group schedule at the beginning of each session, where they kind of let families know, today we're doing beach day. Today we're going to go on a hike. Today we're going to go on a cookout. Today we're going to check out the map and compass course, or just play some games. So I think there's definitely a lot of variability there with what kinds of activities kids are getting to experience. Yeah.
And I feel like I maybe heard in that question, and you can ignore me if I'm wrong, but like, is there conversation about STEPS sessions and what they are in those age groups and why they're important? And I would say that there's not so much a focus in age groups about diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives specifically, mainly because those sessions are for kids to come up and just play games and have fun. And this again started in the summer of 2020, when there was a lot of families of color coming up from the cities to just get a break from those conversations. And so the focus of age groups has always been pretty lighthearted. And so I just wanted to kind of answer that, if that was in the question as well. Yeah. Mhm. Did you have a hand up? Yeah.
I'm sorry. I was wondering about your staff. Well, what are you looking for when you look for staff? In terms of, would you characterize your staff more as generalists that work with an age group across their participation? Or do you have specialist staff that you look for that are more developing skills based or a certain kind of activity based?
Sure. So most of our program staff is pretty young. They're usually recent high school or college graduates, and they come not necessarily from an educational background, but just with a desire to be at camp and work with kids and spend the summer here. A lot of them came from a camping background themselves, whether that was at family camp at DeNord or camping up here in northern Minnesota in some regard. So I would say most of them are generalists, and they swap around with the different age groups depending on the week. There's not like this person is always with the teens because they're really good with teens, although that does sometimes happen when you have an exceptional staff member. And there are some specialty roles, such as our naturalist position, which Sal has worked in the past, and positions with our Center for Outdoor Ventures and Exploration. Those are staff members that specifically deal with our outdoor programs like the biking program and the boating program. But honestly, generally, those are drawn from the general pool of staff, and then those skills are taught during our training program at the beginning of the summer. So again, short answer, mostly generalists. Okay, so the question was, with our role of trying to bring diversity, equity, inclusion to Camp Northern Lights, what resources have we used in the past, or where do we look for our own education? And I will say that I have some background before I worked for Camp Northern Lights, I came from the Voyaguer Outward Bound School, who, similarly to many other organizations in this area and in Minnesota as a whole, went through a large conversation in 2020 about who are we as an organization, what is our history, how inclusive are we? So a lot of the materials that I'm familiar with came from our conversation with Justice Outdoors, which was a program that the Outward Bound School partnered with at the time. And they provided a lot of resources before I even was associated with Camp Northern Lights for my own education. There's also a number of resources that I've found through social media that I use for my personal education that I'm happy to share, but I'd have to do a little bit of looking up on my phone to get the specifics on that.
Yeah, I'll add too. I guess one place that I've gathered a lot of my own education on DEI topics. I worked at Camp Widgewagon. I worked there for the past few fall, winter, springs. And so one group that comes in the fall, winter, spring months is the Youth Leadership Initiative, led by a woman named Lee Vu. And she also works as a facilitator with the Courageous Change Collective. And I think they kind of do facilitate DEI trainings and conversations with different organizations. And so just talking with her kind of about camp and things that we can work on and things to keep in mind, as well as social media as well for me. But then also, trying to include our campership and yeah.
So are there initiatives or a goal to create EDI in the staffing of Camp Northern Lights?
Yes, great question. So are there efforts or initiatives to create EDI in the staffing at Northern Lights? Yeah, we kind of, we look at it like a whole camper lens. So, making our community more diverse. Of course, we want staff to be more diverse, because then our campers can see themselves in staff, and see themselves becoming staff, and then that in turn will make our staff more diverse after that. But our STEPS program is kind of mostly focused on our campers, but also our leadership development program. And so we hope that kind of that spirit of coming to camp, realizing what it's like, becoming more comfortable at camp, can lead people to keep coming back, and then hopefully we'll diversify our entire camp slowly.
And have you had particular challenges that the people who have come have met that you didn't expect?
Yeah, great question. So any particular challenges that we ran into with people who came up to camp through STEPS and we didn't expect? One big piece of feedback we got after the first summer was language at camp and language use. And, we had a lot of Spanish speakers who, maybe spoke a little bit of English, but were primarily Spanish speakers at home. And so with that feedback, we developed some more signage. We've been trying to get some of our website that's not, able to be translated with Google Translate to be in other languages. And we have, some staff are bilingual. And so just making sure that we're able to advertise that if people need assistance with language. One other thing we did was we created an option when you register for camp to put down primary language spoken at home, just so we're aware of that and can support families when they come up. Yeah.
Are there other things around being in nature, being in a rural area, those types of things that have created challenges?
Yeah, I think one of the things that makes Camp Northern Lights unique in comparison with camps like DeNord or other Y camps in the area is because we're on a big lake and we are pretty accessible. We're via boat access. We have things like these, I sort of alluded to them briefly, but the motor boats, the pontoons, and the fishing boats, which help make families a lot more, things like that. That's just one small example, but families who've maybe never been in a canoe or kayak before and are a little bit unsure about being on a big lake by themselves for the first time, it's just one option that makes connecting with nature a little bit more accessible. And that's something that $150 stipend that Sal talked about with the STEPS initiative, that's helpful, because in our normal sessions, a lot of those sort of activities can be locked behind a fee. And so for STEPS families, it's really important that we make those accessible. And there have been sort of wide conversations about things specifically with the disability access and whether things, should we have paved trails? Is that taking away from the feeling of being in nature, or is it making it more accessible for people? These conversations are certainly ongoing, but there are definitely things like that where families come up and say, there's a lot of bugs here. We don't want to be in the bugs all the time. We're used to the cities where we can go inside and have air conditioning, and camp is never going to be exactly like living in an urban center, but we try and prepare our campers for that, and ultimately make sure that they're surrounded by people who look like them. So, and have their shared experiences, so they can either gripe about it together or problem solve it together, or so that we can learn about it and make our program more accessible.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you all.